Today's episode is brought to you by Checkfront, the booking platform trusted by over 5,000 tour and activity operators around the world. You can start your own free 21-day trial over at checkfront.com.
Welcome to the Tourpreneur Podcast. Travel industry veteran Shane Whaley will take you on a journey with fellow tourpreneurs, sharing their tips, ideas, insights, and success stories to inspire you to make your tour business the best it can be. And now, here is your host, Shane Whaley.
And welcome to episode 88 of the Tourpreneur Podcast. We have another COVID-19 check-in as part of our Comeback Stronger series. Today we are joined on the show. Our guest is Forrest Parker of Undiscovered Charleston, where food and history meet. Welcome to Tourpreneur, Forrest.
Thanks so much for having me, Shane.
So what's the situation down in Charleston right now?
Much as they say in foreign policy and economics, we're cautiously optimistic. The state has begun gradually sort of reopening little by little. I think, we're anxious to get things going again. But of course, chief on everyone's mind is the last thing we want is a recurrence or, to promote a second wave, that sort of thing. So it's a very sort of gradual process. The tourism business, I think, is really kind of, more towards the bottom of the list because first and foremost, the local authorities are trying to get, the needs of the community, local community taken care of. And then as things, I think, progress optimistically, then they'll, look more towards loosening things up for tours. But as things stand now, although we're not in lockdown per se, you can go out and this week they're opening gyms and hair salons, which for me is good. I've been debating whether or not to get a perm or grow out a full-on mullet. But tours are, there's still no tours. I was out riding about before work a couple days ago and saw a tourism officer, and I was like, they cruise around the historic district on bikes and walk and that sort of thing. I was like, hey, are we open for tours? And they said no. So my guess is they were maybe looking to see if people were giving sort of clandestine tours or something, which I haven't really seen.
What's the general mood been like? I know you're pretty involved with the Tour Guide Association there in Charleston. What's the mood like amongst your peers right now?
Well, I think, all of us are pretty anxious. Clearly we've never seen anything like this come along. My own sort of take on things is people are excited and enthused and ready to get back on the streets. April and May are two of the nicest, most lovely months to be here in Charleston, and certainly key, travel times for us. So for a lot of us, this is, it's really become quite damaging. There's a lot of really well-established tours. There are a lot of, smaller sort of independent tours offering, inclusive and very sort of curated and bespoke experiences. So it really runs the gambit in terms of the types of tours that you can enjoy here in Charleston. And I think, in terms of like with restaurants, I keep saying over and over again, when this passes, it'll be a dramatically altered landscape that we see. In terms of the tour, I'm hopeful because, I think overhead charges are significantly less with tours than they tend to be with restaurant operations. So I'm hopeful that the tour community will come out, a little less scathed than some of the restaurants. But, for me, for my tour on Undiscovered Charleston, I really kind of have, one foot in two worlds. I mean, I've been a career chef for 25 years, and I started the tour a year ago. And it's, it's really been this sort of hybrid experience where people, we walk through the historic district and, look at the history and the culture of the city through a very, inclusive lens of food. So we see some of the same things they might see on some of the tours, Rainbow Row and that sort of thing. But the overarching narrative is about food is kind of the common glue for the history of the people of Charleston. And then we make our way back to the lovely Bistro Avan, where I give a 3-course cooking demonstration with lunch and wine pairing. So, it's the cooking demonstration, it's the wine, it's the lunch, it's the historic tour, and it's really kind of a lovely half-day experience. And I said, you know what? It's my first time out of the kitchen in 25 years. I'm going to take my shot. If it sticks, great. And if not, I know that I've done it. And, a lot of hard work over the past year. And the slow season was busier than the busy season, and I really was well positioned, and then just nothing.
Yeah.
So, I'm blessed in that I've got, a great partner with Chef Dominique Chantepie, who owns the Bistro Van, where he hosts me. He's been very patient and helpful. I'm very blessed in that I was able to pick up some hours cooking again. I said, once the tour was established, I said, hot damn, I'll never go back to a commercial kitchen again. This is great. And, never say never.
Never say never. So you've been operational for a year, is that correct?
That's right. Almost to the day, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I'm getting hungry just thinking about that tour.
Well, I hope you'll come to Charleston. This is it really is a special place, and it puts the zap on you. And it's such a diverse and vibrant community. And I think that's very true of our tour industry here. I mean, we're really blessed to have leaders in the industry like John Laverne with Bulldog. I mean, he really has been doing some fantastic stuff, and the leadership that he expresses, I think, is fantastic, because he's not just looking out for himself and his team. He's looking out for the greater good of the tour community and Charleston community. I mean, he could have done a pivot and privatized towards the online tours, but rather than that, he's used free online tour experiences almost daily. I think as a means of just creating some content and keeping people engaged and keeping his company, but also tourism in Charleston front of mind for people who might be sequestered at home.
Yeah, he's a wonderful man, and I'll give him a shout out because he was helping a good friend of ours with a potential new business in tours, and he spent quite a lot of time, writing down his thoughts on email, and I know they were due to have a call, and he doesn't have to do that. He's struggling like the rest of us. But I thought, wow, you mentioned being blessed earlier on, and I continuously feel blessed to work in an industry where, for the most part, it's not dog eat dog. Most of us help each other. I know there are exceptions to that in certain areas, but most of us are helping each other.
I think I think it's true, Shane, and I think there's almost an analog between the tour community here and the restaurant community. I mean, like I say, I'm an industry lifer. Worked for Chef Frank Lee from slightly north of Broad and some of the Maverick restaurants for 5 years. And while in Charleston, there's always been an intense amount of competition, there's always been also an intense amount of collaboration. And I think most of us as chefs want to see the scene here continue to grow and to be relevant. And I think most of us recognize that a rising tide floats all boats. So we get excited when we see these opportunities and these hits come along, but we can equally be critical of one another when we see somebody start to take their foot off the gas pedal a little bit. In kitchens, when you start taking shortcuts, they call it shoemaking. And if you develop a habit of shoemaking, then you might earn the nickname Geppetto. In which case, it's probably time to dust off that LinkedIn. But at any rate.
Yeah, exactly. What kind of things have you been learning? So during the downtime, have you been on any webinars or courses? How have you been spending your time?
Well, the first couple of weeks, like many, I was just kind of overwhelmed. I did sign up for a few webinars, Food Treks webinar series that they had, and dusted off some things on SEO. And SEO, I'm not the subject matter expert, and I'm certainly not the sharpest knife in the drawer. My take on that is, when I started the tour, I kept the name of my tour the same as my blog that I've had for 10 years. And in terms of SEO, I think that kind of helps because I have roots that go back 10 years. But, yes. As a chef, just kind of, doing, posting these one-off posts, I wasn't worried about SEO. I was just creating content to create it. And now when I, the little bit that I've garnered about SEO, when I go back, some of the fundamental mistakes I see that I've made have been, pretty egregious. I think it, outweighs things as a whole, because I do tend to get somewhat consistent traffic just because some of the posts aggregate and do better than others. But, I'm just trying to go through and clean there's one post, there's a post I wrote on William Days, who is credited with inventing she crab soup, one of our iconic dishes here in Charleston. So, for instance, I went back in and sort of, focused on that post because I know I get more traffic from it. And then, just to kind of focus and cherry pick some low hanging fruit, I guess. But, I hear a lot of pitches and I see a lot of things, come across on the interweb about, we're going to do this, that, and the other for you in terms of SEO. And I just kind of feel like it's, I think you mentioned the other day, it's like going to the gym. You just kind of have to stay with it. And as Frank Lee, one of my mentors, Chef Frank Lee, was fond of saying, gentle pressure, relentlessly applied.
It's true. It's true.
The world's only weekly independent podcast for the tours and activities industry. This is Tourpreneur.
I'm 23 days of no alcohol, mainly plant-based, a little bit of cheese here and there, and exercising 6 days a week. And I hopped on the scales today. I'm like, oh, is that it? And it's the same with blogging, right? You write this beautiful blog post and you're like, it's still not ranking. But, 2 years from now, if you've done it right, it will be there. And the same with me. 2 years from now, maybe I'll running a half marathon down in Charleston. You never know, right?
Come on, man. Let's go.
Brilliant stuff. I am hearing good things about SEO training from Skillshare. And I know they have a 2 months free option. Now, I haven't personally done this. It's just what I've heard from doing the check-ins that a couple of people were raving about that on Skillshare. So I don't know if you want to take a look at that, Forrest.
I will. And I also, Jason McDonald, who has authored several books on SEO, search, social media marketing, that sort of thing. I think he's an instructor at Stanford. He's made quite a bit of his stuff available for free PDF download. Like I say, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, and chefs, I've always been in love with the idea of learning, but I'm attention deficit, and I was in love with the idea of learning, but really bad at it. And I think that's one of the reasons why cooking resonated with me, because getting hands-on, kinesthetically watching the butter sauce break and then bring it back really kind of stuck with me much more than academics.
Yeah.
So for me, it's very much a hit or miss process, but I just, your analogy of going to the gym is perfect. The first battle is showing up.
It is. And I do take your point on that one of the things I try and do on the podcast is there's a lot of gurus out there that will talk theory, but I want to talk to people who've done something, who've said, oh yeah, I worked on this blogging campaign, a year ago. This is what I did. Here is the series. And now I'm ranking for these keywords. That's what I want to bring onto the show rather than just the theory, because I'm not someone who's really into theory. I want to know how you did something. Were you successful? Or if you weren't successful, why weren't you successful? That for me, I learn better that way.
And I think, to your point, creating the resource guide will be fantastic. And, part of me hopes during all of this to find the time to build a page to add to my website to offer some consulting in terms of restaurants or tours. Because if there's an opportunity to drive some revenue through business to business, then that would be huge, of course. But for instance, you were I think talking about some of the through the Sandsea Shield and some of the that sort of thing that goes on. Well, South Carolina has a fantastic group. Department of Health and Environmental Control, South Carolina DHEC, and they, while they oversee a lot of the efforts going on in terms of COVID, they also really kind of oversee restaurant inspections, that sort of thing. And so, my last, I typically have a great rapport with them. My last inspections were respectively 199 and 100, and I'm ServSafe certified, that kind of thing. So, to apply some of that fundamental backgrounds I've garnered through working in restaurants and properties of scale. I was executive chef at Opryland for 5 years through the flood in 2010. And being able to help, somebody, kind of muddle through some of these things in terms of best practices, whether it's a restaurant or a tour, To the listeners, I would just say, if you have a question about that sort of thing, if I can be an available resource, if I don't know, I'd be happy to, put you in touch with somebody. Look me up on the website, contact me through Undiscovered Charleston or through LinkedIn. I always, it's kind of one of the things I enjoy doing best is building the people around me and the teams around me, and then putting them on a path to success and creating opportunity for other people. And a lot of times it's simply as simple as creating an introduction. And I really, that's something I really, really enjoy.
Well, that's how this podcast has grown, to be honest. I mean, almost 10,000 downloads in April. I haven't spent a cent on advertising, but it's introductions, it's word of mouth, it's people, like you were saying, you were sharing the show with tour guides in Charleston. I mean, it's exactly the same thing, tapping into resource. I keep saying, you don't go to school to learn tourism, right? I've just finished a certificate of tourism and hospitality management, kindly offered by Florida Atlantic University. There was nothing in there about attractions. There was nothing in there about tours or activities. It was all hotels and restaurants and resorts. So a lot of this information, you can't go study. You've got to go and speak to people like yourself that have been in the trenches. People like John, who's been on the front lines for a long time. The amount of knowledge we all have, you just can't get on an academic course.
That's true. And, it's real world application. So,
yes.
They can set you up with a baseline knowledge base, just like with the Charleston tour guide exam. But, ultimately, what you do with it is, it's incumbent upon you to take what you've garnered and build something and make it unique and make it your own. And hopefully that's something that resonates with guests. I'm really blessed because who knew, but, walking people through the historic district and then, coming back and cooking shrimp and grits with them and talking about the history of our rice culture, along with some wine pairings is something that's seemed to stuck.
Great. Well, Forrest, thanks for coming on the show today. Definitely would love to invite you back on so we can do the full deep dive when you're up and running again. And I hope that's sooner rather than later. I urge listeners to go to undiscoveredcharleston.com, check out Forrest's website and tours, and obviously the show notes. The links will be on the show notes at tourpreneur.com/88. Thanks very much, Forrest.
Well, thanks again for having me on, Shane. I really appreciate the opportunity. To you and to your all of your listeners, I would just say, please be encouraged. I can't tell you when this is all going to end, but it will end, and we're going to get through it. So, my strong encouragement to you is, don't let this define you, but rather use the time as an opportunity to improve upon what you've already built. And, you'll come out the other side, not necessarily unscathed, but definitely stronger.
Thanks for listening to the Tourpreneur podcast. Be sure to visit tourpreneur.com to join the conversation and access the show notes, including links to the resources mentioned on today's episode. This is Tourpreneur.